I know you guys. Oh, I've also got jokes too.
Okay, now we're on.
We're at two parts to the meeting. Our wonderful speakers, and then steering committee membership nominations. Thank you. Okay, hi. This is Ray and Joe. Welcome to Northside Democracy for America, whose mission is to elect socially progressive, fiscally responsible, and ethically committed Democrats to all levels of government. We want to welcome people that are here watching this virtual meeting or in person for the first time. Please make sure NDFA has your email address and blah, blah, blah. Let's give a shout out to 99 Perspectives, the technical support guru. Hello to Josh, who is producing this show. Please report your attendance, including door knocking, to northsidedfa@gmail.com. And now you can do it on our website. Right, EJ? Yes. Okay. Don't forget about our important NDFA tip jar, which is it out? I don't see it. The live tip jar. Mary.
What happened? I'll just stand here with my hands on.
Okay.
I'm 38.
Okay. We have a 38 here. To help support the costs of these video casts, live meetings, and it can also be found on our Facebook page, website, and YouTube. Please sign in at the front table if you are here. So, without much further ado, anything else we need to say before we bring Maggie in to discuss about the committee?
Just for those of you that are listening live or watch us a little later on the stream, if you can give us a little like, that way we'll get a little bit better sense of who's watching, other than, having to depend on Zuckerberg, because who wants to do that?
Someday we gotta get off that site. Okay, Maggie?
Sure.
We would love to hear from you. Maggie O'Keefe, 40th Ward Committee Person, and you're up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Maggie O'Keefe, for everyone that I haven't been able to meet or chat on the phone with. I serve as the Democratic Committee Woman of the 40th Ward in Chicago that represents West Ridge to Ravenswood Manor, Lincoln Square, West Edgewater, West Andersonville, Rose Hill Cemetery, lots of voters there, Rogers Park, Ravenswood, Budlong Woods, and so on and so forth. Basically, Rose Hill Cemetery is the center. We have a couple of appendages now that go up to West Ridge and Ravenswood Manor. So our new ward is 7,000 new voters, so approximately 10,000 new constituents that we get to talk to and are going to be starting next week, our brand new constituents, which I'm really excited to get to know more. I, as a committee person, I got elected in March of 2020. I got the phone call in April from President Chair Preckwinkle, and we had to go immediately online and build an organization from the ground up, having taken it over from a 36-year incumbent for the first time. And we were all online and we had to do everything there. But luckily we had a lot of support. Obviously it was the presidential election at that time. And so we had a lot of people that wanted to do some incredible work. And through the time that I've been the committee person, we are now the 8th highest voter turnout ward in the city of Chicago. We are super proud of that number, and we've really increased voter turnout specifically around younger voters. Even in this last election in 2023, the 40th ward compared to 2019, we saw a decrease in people turning out to vote from the general in the February to the April, but in this election we saw a percent increase from the February to the runoff, and we also saw over 1% increase in turnout from 2019 to 2023. Now we did have new ward boundaries, so I'm still processing that data. And I'm looking at the data guru here. Yeah, we're going to be going through that information. But something that we did see in the election in 2023 was that the 40th ward actually had a pretty high amount of people that did not return their vote by mail ballot. And so that's our first initiative going into the summer in our conversations with voters, is to talk to those folks that didn't return their ballots or didn't vote they voted in 2019 but didn't vote in 2023. So we can start having those conversations of, re-engaging those people before the election. I guess I'll rewind and go back to like what a committee person does, because like that's a lot of the questions I get, which is totally fine and normal. And they're like, oh, so you work in the alderman's office? I'm like, well, that's actually illegal, but no. I'm the political muscle, and the alderman does the government stuff. And like I said, we've separated it for the first time in 36 years in that last election. Thank you. And it's been really positive for the 40th ward specifically, and the north side. We've seen a lot, there's a lot of people that are non-aldermen that are also committee people over on the north side. We'll see that happen, granted I get reelected, but also in the 48th ward, it happened in the 46th ward, the 47th ward, and we have some work to do in some of our other north side, in the 39th ward as well. So a committee person is, like I said, the political muscle, the political arm. It is really what you make of it, okay? At its core, it's getting Democrats to come out to vote in every single election. But what we do in the 40th Ward Dems is, I don't think it's different. It's just what you should do. Endorsing candidates that are independent from maybe the Democratic Party. I don't always go with the slate from the Cook County Democratic Party. Be that what you will. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Here in the 40th Ward, what we've seen when we've endorsed candidates that are not slated by the party is that we actually are winning our elections in the 40th, even if they don't win their overall race. And so that's how we know that our messaging is really working, and that we're reaching voters about what the person does, like what they're running for and who they are as a person, especially when it comes around judges. And so we're also really proud in the 40th Ward that we have an endorsement process that is transparent. You can watch it online. In the 2022, we did 16 hours worth of endorsements, and you can watch those all. And with the judges specifically, doing our work in finding out who these people are. A lot of these folks anyone running for judge can't have an opinion. So they can't tell us if they're pro-choice. They can't tell us these types of things because of ethics laws. So for us, it's really about the core of who they are in their own communities. What do they do off the bench or off the floor as a lawyer? And that's kind of what helps us establish our rapport with them and whether or not we're going to endorse.
Where do they volunteer?
Yeah, exactly. Right. How they where do they volunteer? And what kind of law do they practice? I think is really important too. Right? We need to have a broad range. It's not just diversity on the bench is not just about where you come from in the city or the county. It's really about your values. And in the 40th Ward, we are always about community values. Another thing that committee people do is we help make sure that we have enough election judges on election day. I hear that there's going to be another pay increase for election judges on election day. Obviously, it's very hard to retain top talent for election judges because hopefully people have full-time jobs, or if they have a job that they can take the day off and do that civic duty, that's great. But a lot of time we're having a hard time with that retention, and we saw that with COVID, of course, too. But now we've lowered the age for for students to be able to become election judges, and with it being a holiday in the state, that also helps as well, because students can serve as election judges. What else do we do, Ray? Endorsements,
and then
voter turnout.
And then when people
appointments.
retire, appointments.
Appointments, yes. So I was really lucky. I think I was really lucky. I think maybe other people don't think I was that lucky. But I was lucky to appoint our first LGBTQ senator, Senator Mike Simmons, to the Illinois House when Heather Staines had retired. And so we do an appointment process. And our appointment process that we did with Simmons actually had introduced legislation to make it a more transparent process. We actually just found out that it didn't actually pass. But the way that we did the process for Senator Simmons was that we had community forums, we had it live streamed, and for us in the 40th Ward, what we did was we opened up a survey, like who do you want out of these 5 candidates, like who would you want me to appoint? At the end of the day, Alderman/Committeeman Harry Osterman and I had the highest weighted vote total. I had no idea what he was going to do until that day, and we were very fortunate to be able to get Senator Mike Simmons as our state senator. We actually have 3 appointments coming up all simultaneously because of this last election. So you'll see Brandon Johnson's seat for Cook County Commissioner be appointed coming up. We will see Christina Passione-Zayas' seat come up for appointment because she's leaving her state senator seat and going as deputy chief to Johnson. And then Lamont Robinson has moved on from state rep to alderman. So we're going to see at least 3 appointments coming up, which is pretty cuckoo banana. But I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to do that process. I think if any of you live in those districts, you should request your committee person to have a public forum in those scenarios, because those are really, really important to know who these candidates are running for those appointments. I'm seeking, thank you. I hope I can get your support for re-election. I am running for committee person again. I think I've shown that I don't just run for office. I could have run for the state senate appointment. I could have run for the state rep seat that Han Wynn received. I could have run for alderman again, and I didn't. I love this job. I love this work. I don't get paid, but I love it. It's been such an honor to bring people together in a time of struggle and a time of need. Like I said, this position is really what you make of it. And so I really hope you elect me for these next 4 years so we can continue having these conversations with voters that are sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes necessary. And I would really like to bring you on those doors as well while we go talk to these nuanced voters who, maybe didn't show up to vote in the last election and ask that core question, why? We're also doing voter registration too, and so this summer is going to be a lot of fun, and the 40th Ward is pretty hopping, so so I hope you come and join me for the ride. Thank you.
Any questions let's start off going left to right.
Okay.
So
What was your name?
My name's Ivy. I live in the 48th Ward, and Harry Osterman was our alderman, and so I'm wondering, can you clarify who the we is that you were just talking about, and why was Harry Osterman part of that group when he was an alderman, not a committee?
Got you. So that's a great question, Ivy. So I would say, I don't know the exact number, but it's definitely over 50% of aldermen also serve as committee person. You could be duly elected because this is an unpaid position. So a lot of aldermen want this job because it helps insulate them. That's what happened in my ward. For 36 years, the alderman was also the committee person. Okay? So he built a political organization that surrounded himself. Okay? So now that Lenny, Alderman-elect Lenny Hoppenworth is going to be the alderman, Harry is now only committee person. So his only responsibility as of right now is committee person. We are all up in the city of Chicago. All committee people are up for re-election. Okay, up in 2024. So we're the last thing you vote for. So president, committee person.
And it's in the primary.
And it's the primary only. That's correct. Yeah.
Hi, Mary Claire. Brendan Johnson was Cook County
Commissioner.
Commissioner, and Lamont was a state rep.
That's
and
right.
Christine was
Christina Pasiones, I was a state senator
state senator.
for the 20th district.
So does the percentage of your vote change in those three things, or does it stay the same?
Yeah, so I have 0 weighted vote total. That's a great question too. Okay, so the way that appointments work is so let's take a state senator, right? So Senator Simmons. What did I have? I had to have had like 28% of the weighted vote. You need 50% plus 1 vote in order to win an appointment, okay? And so I had about 28%, Harry had, 29%, something like that. And so we equaled 50%. So for Mike, he only needed us 2. But in some other districts, they need more than just 2 committee people or more than just 1 in order to get to that 50% plus 1. So I have 0% because they don't represent the 40th ward. Yeah.
You don't have any of the 20th district?
I don't. So, and this is interesting too. I don't ever, but we are using old ward maps for the new state senate districts, or for the new districts. Does that make sense? So like we're using, I know, I didn't understand either. So old ward maps, and then overlay that onto the new senate district.
Why?
Because we currently still technically serve the old ward right now until 2024, until we're reelected.
So 2028 will be the new ward.
2024, once we're elected in March, because we only run in primaries, we would then be the committee person for the brand new ward, as far as I understand it.
So you have the old
There's
ward.
no rule book, I'm gonna be honest with you.
So you have the old ward, but Andre's got the new ward.
Well, we're just doing the new ward at this point.
The
All of
weighted,
us are.
the weighted vote is based on the vote.
Yes, based on the amount of people that voted in that area.
The last general, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So 2020.
Yep. Maggie, David Igasaki.
Hi, good to see you.
I raised this in the last cycle, but I think it's still relevant. I know I gave you some grief when I heard rumors about your political plans. But are you willing to commit that if you're reelected as ward committee person, that you will not run for alderperson?
I will not commit to that. The reason being is I don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. So if our alderman, for example, maybe he moves on to greener pastures, he moves on to another seat, like me saying, well, I'm not going to run for that appointment. And again, the appointment differs based on the amount of time that happens. So say the alderman leaves his seat before 18 months of his entire 4-year tenure, he gets to make the choice of who would succeed him versus 19 months to 24 months. Am I wrong?
No, it's the mayor. The mayor.
The whole time? The mayor
Well,
has
there's a period when it's an election. If there's enough time, yeah, there's an election.
Okay.
And when it's
Is
too
it
short of a time,
after
it's the
18
mayor.
months? Oh, okay. See, thank you. So, okay.
The alderman doesn't get to choose.
So there's a special election, 1 to 18 months in their term, and then 19 to 24 months would be the mayor, right? So, but what I do commit to, David, is that I would not serve as both alderman and committee person. That is what I commit to.
So you would quit as committee person if you got elected alderperson?
Or appointed.
Elected or appointed?
Or appointed.
Or appointed. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay. I extracted the same commitment from Andre Vasquez before I appointed him.
Good verb. Good verb.
Extract.
Okay, so Joe, hi.
Hi, Joe.
Okay, so as described, not surprisingly, these positions tend to be quite useful for people that might have certain machinery to manipulate power, which I guess it's sort of a two-part question. One, do you anticipate anybody running against you? And two, given the new power in City Hall, Tony still being there, and some of the things we know Governor Pritzker has done, are there forces trying to put certain people in certain committee chairs that we should be aware of as NDFA?
I have not heard of that. I don't, as far as I know, I have no challenger, but I go into this knowing that I'm gonna have to collect more signatures than I did the last time because we raised the voter turnout as high as we have. I'll probably still have less than 1,000 signatures that I have to, like quality signatures that I have to collect, which means I'll probably collect what I did the last time, which is 2,400, 2,500 signatures. So I always run like democracy is best when challenged. And so if someone wants to run and they want this seat, you know, let's do it. Let's do what democracy is best. But I have not heard that. I have a great relationship with the chair, with Tony. She values my independence. I think she's a pretty independent person herself. And so I look forward to, you know, if I have a challenger or not, like we're gonna do the exact type of work that I've already wrote out for the summer, regardless of if there's someone that's looking to challenge me.
Yeah. So I have to disclose that Maggie endorsed me when I ran, because part of my ward used to be part of her ward. But my question is, when you're learning all this stuff about how to get new voters out, how to increase turnout, what do you know, because this is not just a ward by ward organization, what do you see as the opportunities, venues, and avenues for sharing practices, and for getting the North Side to learn things and not just doing things ward by ward?
I think it's really important to not be a gatekeeper to things that work. I have people that call me from different parts of the city, other committee people, or the thing is that every organization runs differently. There is no guidebook. Okay, so we built a organization, 14 pages of bylaws. I have to adhere to, but not every organization does that. And so I get calls from folks that are like, oh, I really liked your postcards in the park initiative. I'm doing that now in my community. You know, and anyone that wants to talk about how to increase voter turnout in their ward, I think is a valuable conversation, because I don't know everything. I only know what I know. I know what I've learned based on experience. And so I think we also on the North Side what's happening is these fractions of progressive politics. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think what we have to start looking at is, as I'm looking at the words organizational structure, is that it's not just about power. Right. It's about the people. Right. We have to think about, at the end of the day, like, that's why, like, if someone were to run against me, like, I'm going to run on my record. I'm going to go talk to those people. I'm going to go talk to the voters. That's my boss, right? Not the people that are, quite frankly, sitting in this room, or, organizations that say yay or nay to a candidate. And I think that we're seeing that more and more. Money doesn't mean as much. People power does. And so when I'm advising a candidate or a client about running, and they want to throw six figures to their, it's really about how can we mobilize people to talk about you positively and get the votes. I came into this blind 6 years ago. I had no idea what I was doing. But I just knew that what I knew is that there was a door and there was a person behind it. I didn't care if they were a Democrat or Republican, an independent, 18, 108, it didn't matter. I went and talked to everybody. I raised $40,000 and I came 625 votes shy from getting into a runoff with a 36-year incumbent at 27 years old. That is the word. Thank you. I love it. Maybe 29. Maybe I was 29, guys, okay? Whatever. whatever. I started at 27. But the point being, like, you can do this. This works. You just have to do the work. And you have to be okay with being wrong. And you have to be okay with with being wrong all the time. Like, I say that I fail every single day. Every day I fail to get to that win. So I think we have resources to share. I think something that I would love to do with NDFA is to bring you on for programming, whether that means like what makes a good judge, right? Programming, right? Talking to judges, talking to lawyers, talking to social workers and advocates in the criminal justice space, right? Bring them all together in a panel and like, let's hash it out. Let's talk about what that means. So that we can build up your organization and we can, inherently just get more people into the fold. We keep talking to the same people, right? These rooms look very similar across the city. Let's bring in some new people, right? With different perspectives who might not be as blue as me, okay? Maybe they're a little purple. Maybe they're red, I don't know, but if they want to join the organization, they should be able to. And I think you guys do that too here. Yeah.
I saw the Tribune story about the horrendous delays in justice. Murder cases going on 6 years or something, averages over 2 years. This increases crime. It is hard on the defendants who are innocent until proven guilty and might be incarcerated. This is terrible for everybody. So I would be concerned, and I think it ought to be an issue with judges. How diligently will you work to eliminate long delays? I know some of this is the police department withholding evidence and stuff like that, but what are we going to do to try and rectify this? Because what's happening now is just, it's not justice, it's terrible.
You're right, it's an antiquated process. That judge that you're talking about that has 4.1 years for murder trials, right?
Yeah.
That was Judge Wadis, 40th Ward Dems, did not endorse him.
Right.
Didn't endorse him for
Right.
retention, right? Because we did our job, we did our work.
Right.
We call people like Aaron Goldstein, right? Our friend Aaron Goldstein, who sees these people, and he's like, well,
I try and do due diligence on the judges. Now, I want
got
judges
to.
who will, who don't believe in debtor's prison and will try and work without cash bail, but there are certain people, like the current crowd that killed that young officer, who are dangerous and they're just out there shooting people, and they probably should be behind bars, but even they should not languish in jail, not even before trial, 4 years. Or even 1 year,
It's an injustice on both sides, right? A person who's waiting to receive their judgment, right? They could be innocent, right? Innocent until proven guilty. On the same side, a family who has lost a loved one has to go 4+ years without a judgment. I mean, you're hitting on a lot of topics. What was your name, ma'am?
Sue.
You're hitting a lot of topics, but at the end of the day, there are a few elections. In this upcoming election, we have the state's attorney, it's going to be an open race. When's the last time there's been an open race? Anyone know? It's been a long.
8 years ago?
No, it wasn't open then.
Yeah, well, sure it was.
With Alvarez?
Yeah.
No, Alvarez ran. I'm talking about an open seat for state's attorney.
Okay.
Right? Open seat for state's attorney, right? Because you could argue that, right?
Without the incumbent running.
Right, without an incumbent. This is an open seat for the first time in a very long. I don't know the answer. This is a good Shia Kapos Politico question. When's the last time this seat was open? So we have state's attorney is open. We also have clerk of the circuit court, which is also criminal justice, right? Also criminal justice. Okay, so and then of course our judges. What the judges rely on, Sue, especially these retention judges, is that people don't get down to the bottom of the ballot.
Right.
And so you do your due diligence, but what about your neighbor?
Right.
What about the person that's driving the bus? We got to get folks aware.
I try and email my friends with, links
course.
to
You're doing
Injustice
everything you
Watch
can.
or something, but yeah, you're right, it takes a lot of effort.
It takes a lot of effort. That's where your committee person, you should be able to trust your committee person's judgment. Unfortunately, They don't do the laborious work of sitting down for
Right.
8
They endorse whatever
hours.
The Democratic Central Committee endorses.
Yes. No, you're right, Sue. So, all that to say, you should be able to trust your committee person with because that's what you've elected them to do. There's a lot more work that needs to be done in the Cook County Democratic Party. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in progressive politics. But if we can all come together and realize that we actually can get really bad judges off the bench, and we have,
Good.
okay?
Yeah.
We have. We got rid of 2 in the last cycle. But we can make it happen. It's time to elect judges that reflect community values, that reflect what we need in our criminal justice system, and that are going to listen and respond very well to anyone that comes up in front of them. In traffic court to murder cases.
Right.
Boom. Thanks. Vote for me.
Straight from the Ben Jaworski show, we have Denali Dasgupta, who will be discussing about our new school board system, what's going on, and whatever else she wants to say.
Only that, Ray. So, who here has heard that we are moving from a mayorally appointed school board to an elected school board? Okay, who here thinks that that's going to make a difference?
We hope.
Oh, okay. So, if you think it's going to make a difference, what do you think is possible?
The one thing that makes me think about elected school boards is if they want to get elected, will they run on what they believe in, or will they run on what appeals to their surrounding crowd? And sometimes they could be contradictory, and sometimes people sell their souls, sometimes people say, screw it, I'm gonna risk a loss, whatever. So that's the contradiction that's in my head.
So you got a half hand up. What's the ceiling, the possibility, and then what's the kind of like the fear?
Well, I always defer to more democracy rather than less, and my hope is that the elected school board eventually will be a check on the mayor, completely using the schools as some kind of political whipping boy or whatever, for whatever they're doing.
Jobs?
And I think, politics are messy, there's no guarantee of it, but, we had a mayor, both Daley and Rahm, who appointed just rubber stamp school boards, so it'd be nice not to happen.
I feel like that's a great lead-in. The possibility of an elected school board is the possibility of representation of the needs of Chicago. And I'm going to pause and kind of put a pin in that to say when we talk about public education, one of the things we want to talk about is who we mean when we say the public. The best possible thing that could happen is, like you said, Robert, more democracy. The worst thing that could happen is that the structure of the districts and the way the races run and the way our city is laid out in terms of who votes, how things are districted, where school children live, and what people think public education should and should not be about, means that we do exactly the same rubber stamping that we do now, except we give it the gloss and the mandate of democracy. And so one of the things that I've been spending the last month doing, in addition to sleeping and becoming reacquainted with my family, is working on maps for the elected representative school board. And because I've been working on this, there's a couple of really high-level points that I'm interested in sharing with you. And then to the extent that there's the ability to have some discussion, just hearing some comments back. So who here has heard the term gerrymandering? Okay. So anytime we're creating districts, there is a fear that politics and political influence will shape the districts to put pressure on or sort of like make it easier to get a particular political outcome. We typically think about that in terms of party politics, where we're going to create a district so that somebody who has particular views will get elected. So before we get into the districting, one of the things that's unusual, there's so many things that are unusual about this, and even elected officials have not been fully clear on what this means. But we are going to have 10 districts the next year, and then we are going to have 20. And the number of elected officials and the fact that they are tied to geography, there will only be one at-large seat, means that how we carve up the district depends, hugely determines who is voting for what. And when that board is assembled, because of the diversity of our school district and the diversity of our city, when we ask people critical governance questions like, should we close schools, which there's a moratorium on until the elected school board comes on, or how should we think about resourcing our district? How should funding be related to enrollment? How should we think about some of these things? Because each of these districts is gonna have clusters of concerns. How we draw those districts will shape the voting blocks and factions. That's why I got so excited about the mapping piece. So when we think about gerrymandering, we think that we are going to give some people more power potentially than others. And there's sort of 3-ish best practices for creating a district. We want districts to be contiguous, which means that like they're all connected, so they kind of call it like the no Swaziland rule. We want them to be compact, which means there's some sort of sense, they don't all look like noodles or like something crazy. And we want them to, and this is the thing that's really challenging, compact and contiguous, if we did them perfectly, we would all be in little squares, but we want our elections and our electoral districts to protect the rights, the civil rights of critical minority groups. So we don't want to break people up and dilute their votes by spreading them out too far, because we know that there are some groups that have political interests. And we think back to why we have the Voting Rights Act and why we think so hard about how these things go. In America, that comes down to the issue of race.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Exactly.
It does.
Because there's residential segregation, because there have been things all over this country about discouraging different people from voting, and because, you know, it's critical to engage everyone in democracy. And I'm just like lobbing that at Maggie over there. So one thing that's happened with the school board that's really interesting is because the districts will be drawn according to electoral practice, we are very focused on where voters are and the racial distribution of those voters as a way to get us fair districts. But CPS students and CPS communities are not distributed in our city the same way that voters are. And so this comes back to the big question that I have for groups like this is when we talk about the public and public education, who do we think about? And typically, Robert, for your like rubber stamp mayoral thing, a mayor wants to get elected. And so they aim for the narrowest intersection of the taxpayer, the voter, and some degree of a constituent who they think of as a school user. And when you kind of layer all those things together, some of the loudest voices in the room become privileged parents in our city, predominantly white families who are advocating for certain things, and the mayor and the district start to think about what do we do to our district and our district-wide policy and our governance system to ensure that people don't leave, right? And so that's what the school district governance and policy starts to chase. But that's not relevant for the vast majority of students in our district. So for me, the promise of an elected school board is that instead of chasing this group of people that were worried about leaving us, we start to think about repairing the harm to certain communities. We start to aim our policies and practices at the widest possible swath of our students to make sure that our policies and our governance and our revenue and what we think about when we're making these critical decisions does the best for the most people. So the way that, I'm gonna have an imaginary map of Chicago, the way the distribution of voters looks, and I'll send links because we map this stuff on Twitter, because that's where I do my best work, is voters are very dense on the north side, they're dense along the lake, they're here, and that's just registered voters. When you add turnout, it even further ups where wealthy folks, whiter folks, strongholds and density of those people are. Where our CPS students are, and not even students, but I'm looking at like communities from which lots of students are drawn from census data, because I do think even if you don't have a kid in the district, if you are in a district where there are a lot of kids or you're in a census tract, like your home values, your life, like I live down the block from my elementary school, and so much of my life rises and falls with that school. So our students live around the periphery of the city, which should be of concern for us anyway, because it means that there's something happening with segregation and income and pricing that we're slowly pushing all of our families and our public school kids out of the city. So don't worry about that. One of the things that a group of researchers that I work with, we call ourselves the FOIA Bakery, have discovered is that we would like those same principles of contiguity, compactness, and preservation of key groups to apply not just to voters, but also to students, so that each of these districts will represent students. Because here's what could happen. If we have a big district here along the lakefront and a big district downtown, and those are districts where the numbers of students are very, very low, but the numbers of voters are very, very high, those people are voting with their pocketbooks. Now, in the state Senate's original map, there's a district on the west side here that has a high concentration, I love this imaginary map, that has a high concentration of black students. And that district that was drawn has so many more students to represent, but you know what? Those folks just get one vote. And so looking at the differential of students among the districts, as well as the racial element, will let you know who is potentially getting voice and vote in terms of the services they're going to be receiving, and where we might see people voting outside of the potential interests of the schools and kids, and much more in the interests of like fiscal severance between the city and the school district, or much more in the idea of we need to run a public school system, we got to keep the costs down. We need to run a public school system, but we need to make sure that we have like a couple crown jewels and nothing else matters. So for all of that, what it comes down to, and by the way, it is impossible, virtually impossible, I think. We're still running some simulations to see whether or not we can both equalize the number of voters and the number of CPS students. Quite frankly, residential segregation and income trends in the city of Chicago would make that virtually impossible. So the questions that I want to put out to folks, I guess, are what have you been thinking? What have you been hearing? What do you want to know? And when you think about the districts, now that I've highlighted some of these underlying, like, what is the public and public education? What would you want folks like me who are mapping and researching and going to these hearings to be raising up as critical concerns for democracy? Because this is a really funky thing that's happening. Nothing like this has happened anywhere before. Is that okay? Nice questions? Okay.
We'll go from right to left.
Hi, I'm Eileen. I just have a question. You talk about where CPS students are. We should be looking at where all children in the city are, because we need to get more city children into city schools.
Okay, yeah, so we've done both all populations 5 to 18, and then from the census 5 to 18 who attend public schools. It's roughly similar, but there are some places where there's variation, and it's kind of like here-ish and here-ish. But that's a good point, yeah. But they're actually a smaller percentage than you think.
Oh,
yeah.
What is the state requiring as far as how the districts are run in the law?
So I think it's equal number of, they should be, I can't remember if it's equal population or equal voters. I looked at it right before I came here. And that is really critical because that is just a standard electoral thing. And then beyond that, there aren't a lot of other things. And so what's largely dominated the conversation, and yes, largely dominated the conversation is trying to make districts majority and plurality by race. That is really critical in schooling, and it's really critical in election history, but I don't necessarily think that that is the #1 driver of how school governance conversations are going to happen. Maggie?
My biggest concern is that it's an unpaid position, at least in these first 2 years. And who can run for unpaid positions, but people who have the wherewithal or the opportunity to do it?
I have been asked, and I have said no, precisely for that reason. Like, why would you make a person run again and then not pay them? It's like my worst nightmare.
But it's just like, who can represent on the school board of education if they don't get paid, so, you know.
And it's a lot of work. There's going to be like a lot of learning. You were just talking about like the learning curve. I think it's folks who are well supported, and so you're going to see people who, like to some people's point, are well supported by some group who really wants something to get in there, and we've seen that with school boards across the country in ways that haven't looked great. Or we need to continue to build capacity for that board, whether that looks like research capacity, support capacity, other people just making sure that things are that things can happen. Oh boy, wow. Pulling out all this stuff. So you guys just have it around. I have something like that in my house. What other questions? Yeah, John?
Kind of a process, but I didn't catch what organization you're working with.
Oh, we're just a group of people who are really interested in this, but we call ourselves the FOIA Bakery. We have a nonprofit that exists to just do stuff like this.
So then are there other organizations that are kind of going down and testifying? And then the other part of the question is, ultimately the decision is going to be made by the House and Senate. and the governor signs this, right? That's
Yes.
where this decision gets made.
So yes, there are other groups. Some of them are education advocacy groups. Some of them are groups that represent political interests for different racial and ethnic groups. I do think there are a lot more people who have strong interests in this who I have not seen at hearings and at the table. So I hope this conversation will bring other people who say, hey, wait, we do a lot of educational advocacy and key decisions for us will have to go through the school board. Maybe we should be part of this districting process too. Because once it's enshrined, then this becomes the water that you swim in, right? And a lot of things become much harder to organize. Yeah, Sue.
Are civil rights organizations, including not only the NAACP and the Urban League, but Good Kids, Mad City, youth organizations also involved in this? They're close to the schools. What about them getting involved in drawing the maps and stuff?
I think that would be phenomenal, and I think largely the way that this outreach has gone out, which is just what happens, like I'm not staring right into the camera and telling my elected officials, I don't think this is your fault. I think, Maggie, this is a great place where we need to engage more people, is that a lot of folks who are downstream from these decisions don't yet know what the stakes of the district drawing are. They think the stakes will start for them once the election happens. That's a concern to me.
So they need to, how do you go and recruit these people and get them involved? Some of the young leaders emerging now.
Do you know any? Anybody know any?
No to no.
What?
Door to door.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do this, right?
Oh, okay.
Only people who ask easy questions.
Oh.
Oh, very clear. Go.
The first election will be 10 positions.
So there'll be appointments, and then there will be elections.
And there will be 10 for the whole city.
Yes, there'll be 10 districts, and then it will go to 20. And no one is sure how this will happen. It's weird. I don't know whether the initial 10 boundaries will be maintained, and then each of those 10 will be broken up. I don't know if we're going to do this again. The way that it's written is very open to interpretation, and so we are looking to folks from the House and the Senate to just basically say this is how we've envisioned it. 20 is a lot, though.
Yeah.
And it really allows like a lot of like geographic and racial interests to be enshrined in really interesting ways. So that districting process again becomes very important. Yeah, Joe?
So you're talking about groups that have interest and possibly resources to support people. I can think of two groups right off the top of my head that fit both those requirements.
Is one of them NDFA?
No. One is the Chicago Public Schools, and the other is the Chicago Teachers Union.
Right.
And I actually have always had a fear, even though I absolutely believe that we should have elected school boards, my fear is always that they would simply become an extension of the same battles that we're seeing. Also, I don't think it's a good idea if either of those, either CTU or CPS, have their hands in this. It should be independent. So is it so far as you know, and what can be done to keep it that way if it is?
Again, I think it starts with an appointment process. I don't know what that will look like, but I think, again, the more we let people know that they are stakeholders in this, so I'm going to be writing some stuff to just sort of like help connect everyday experiences for folks to say, hey, this thing that happened, actually that there will be really key governance decisions before these folks in the first 3 years of this. If you care about this, care about the maps, care about the elections, care about whatever. I think the only way we can do this is getting more people to vote. It's like more democracy.
Point of clarification, CPS couldn't fund candidates.
As far as we know.
Well,
Yeah, they can't fund candidates because
they can certainly have influence.
CTU can because it's a political.
The only way they can avoid what Schumer gets is like basically to prevent CTU or CPS from endorsing a candidate.
I think who you gotta worry about is Uline and
Oh, sure.
Book banners.
Prof and every crazy ass, anti-CRT
Griffith
group out there
that's
going to fund the right wing to try to take over the seat.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Mary?
Let's go on to Mary.
How do charter schools fit into this unfolding mix?
So there will be some governance decisions related to how charters work, but charters are chartered at the state level. So there will be some governance decisions that are relevant. But in the districting process, this is just about creating lines and saying there's voters in here and like this chunk of people gets a vote, and this chunk of people gets a vote, and this chunk of people gets a
So
vote.
the students who are in charter schools that fall within a boundary are not considered students for the elected school?
For the elected school board, no one is thinking about students. This is just something that now, through making a lot of noise, we're trying to get people to think about. Yeah.
A school board is not thinking about students, that just sounds.
Oh, I said the drawing of the district. The drawing of the district is not looking at the distribution of students. That is sort of my, like, if I was one thing that I could ask elected officials to think hard about in the drawing of the districts, it would be where students and young people are. Yeah.
Two questions. One is, or clarification, if you can help. The mayor's gonna appoint 10 and we're gonna elect 10. So there'd be a 20-person school board, correct?
Yes.
First time.
21, I think, because there might be a
21.
president or something like that.
And
Yeah.
then in 4 years or 2 years, it'll flip to all 20 being elected, or 21 being elected. That's how it works. So are they gonna take however the districts get drawn this time and then just cut them in half each one?
No one knows.
So it's, oh, okay.
This
So
could,
it
this could
be
just be a
completely-
dry run,
Yeah.
and then they could draw 20. I'm looking to hear something more
So the
definitive.
parallels to the police board are quite
Yes.
rich.
This might be a weird question, but like for like the school board officials, like would they be prone to donations and endorsements and stuff like that, or no?
I think so. I mean, we saw it with police board, right? I think that's yeah.
Especially if they're not being paid.
So if you run in 2 years, you gotta run, so if you're one of the first 10, then you gotta run again in 2 years?
No, I think it's staggered.
Yeah, it's staggered.
Okay.
It's a 4-year term. So the next 10.
And then their district might be half the size?
Yeah, right, they could be
Yeah,
a
I
totally
mean,
different
so
district.
this is all very, very open-ended. So maybe I'm thinking way too hard about how we draw these first 10 districts, but I do think there will be governance issues that are gonna come up like right away.
On a student, well,
You
no,
should
no,
have,
it's a question for you.
right, you should
But on a student basis, you have to look at it more drill down. Special needs students, how do you represent them? And then they drill down to even more different types of special needs students. And they could all be in one section and not really be adjudicated or anything. The same with low-income students, free and reduced lunchroom students. And there's other types of, homeless. How do you work with the homeless students? So that's why I was talking about program area. This is above your bigger. But, that's the reason why you want to look at that, to really see the individual types of students.
So because this is enshrined in electoral law, we can't actually use the constituency of the schools to determine the size of the district, or those groups are protected civil rights categories in many cases. And so what I've also asked for, so priority 1 is think about where students live, and priority 2 is district by district. We currently do not publish those kinds of key civil rights metrics about where students live. We do it by where they attend. And I think it's really important that each elected representative and their full district understands the distribution of all of those key populations, because that is not possible to district around, so we have to still govern around it.
Because a lot of special needs students are bused to schools that are away from their house.
And magnet schools.
And magnet schools too. Yeah. Okay, we have to, thank you, Zanelli. That was, all I can say is, the last 2 speakers, everybody should be watching this, today's, because they were both great, very informative, and kudos